All right. I think the microphones are working better for a change after lunch. Welcome back to everyone. We are obviously making a small change to the program. Our host, Archbishop Rowan, seems to have been delayed. I think he was traveling from London where he had an event this morning. But Mr. Suchet has been gracious enough to swap places on very short notice. We're going to proceed with that planned sort of conversation and discussion now, and keep our fingers crossed for Archbishop Rowan to arrive in time for the last session. You are very familiar to many people, I should say, but I'm just going to spend a minute or so trying to introduce you. I must confess that we've only met this morning for the first time, but we were in correspondence for the past couple of months, I think, by email and by written letters, and in the last few weeks by telephone as well. So that helped create a sense of a rapport between the two of us, and also between you, I suppose, and the Institute here in Cambridge. You are, of course, an accomplished actor. You're widely admired and recognized for your extensive stage, television, and film career. Some might even call you a national treasure, which I'm sure you are, and we all feel that, I think. Many of us probably know you and are fond of you for the portrayal of the Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot in the TV series. Some might have seen you in the stage role as sort of Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Earnest. And I think you've most recently made an appearance even in the Doctor Who series this year. So your acting career and the range of your involvement spans quite a number of sort of ranges. But you're also very much a Christian, and I think this is where this conversation between you and the Institute began, and I'm very grateful that you made time, and also providentially, I think God made time for you to be here with us, because there was some doubt about your filming schedule, and things got sort of changed and updated at the last minute, but it turns out that you were indeed able to come here today. I must confess that I told you this morning, and I'm going to share this with everyone. About a year ago, I decided that I needed to listen more or read more of the Gospels and more of the Bible, but I just didn't have the time. So I went ahead and I bought the audio recording by yourself of the Psalms, and then I loved it so much that I went ahead and I bought the New Testament, and then include the Gospels and the epistles of St. Paul particularly. And as I said to you this morning, your voice has been my companion over many miles of motorway, either going to London to see people, or for church services, or around Cambridge visiting people, and even here in Cambridge cycling. You often, if you see a priest wearing headphones, I'm not listening to. It's most likely that I will be listening to you rather than some fashionable song. But I want to say that I'm grateful for you, for what you've done recording the Bible. It's a sign of it's a sort of an apostolic mission or gesture that you made, I think, because transmitting the faith, that we're making it accessible, is a huge blessing, and I think is something that we sometimes take for granted, and we don't make that step to appropriate it internally. But I'm very grateful to you. It has helped me as a Christian, it has helped me as a priest, for my Sunday sermons and for my interactions with people. And I think this brings me to the purpose of our conversation today, which is having the benefit of a Christian perspective on a lot of these issues that some of us talked about here today. I think would be something useful to all of us. I have some rough questions, sort of a line of discussion that we tentatively agreed, but I just want to say that second part of our conversation will be open to everyone in the audience to ask questions, and we will try and keep this as freely and as fluid as possible, and as the Spirit leads us to talk. So I suppose if I could start with the first question, a bit louder. I'll pull this closer to me. What do you see as the most what are in your mind the greatest opportunities and the greatest challenges for being a Christian today? How do you find yourself as a Christian in today's world?
The question is, how do I find myself as a Christian in today's world? First of all, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. It's very hard out there. I won't pussyfoot around this subject at all. It's tough out there. I wish I could spend my time in institutions like this, but I can't. I wish I could spend my time in churches. I wish I could spend my time talking to Christians. They're not out there, not in my world. There are very few. And in my world, there are such diverse opinions now of how we should be. And in a country, I get to pause for 1 second and say, anything I say today is, if it's out of line with anybody's theology or belief or principle, I apologize now, because I can only speak as myself, as a Christian, where I find myself now. Is that okay? I don't want to... I'm not here to be careful, and I'm here to be disagreed with as well. As somebody said to me at drama school, if I teach you anything you disagree with, you've got to fill it with something else. So that I offer you today. So I believe we live in a world of a lack of spiritual authority and moral leadership. I believe that very deeply and very sincerely. I believe that the church, whatever tradition we come from, we feel very safe within it. And we leave it and go out into the world and lead a different existence. We don't take our Eucharistic experience, whatever it may be, in different traditions, out into the street. We don't take our belief of the Trinity out to the world. We do not embrace the world with the love of Christ in the poor areas of the world. Our church doors are often closed at night where people need help. And it's tough out there. We are led by such liberalism in politics, because the only thing one cares about, whichever party you're in, is the vote. So therefore, in politics, one looks for the popularist stance, and I'm afraid to say so, especially as the gentleman just walking in has done so at a time when I can say also that in my own experience we're living in a great liberalism within the church, to the extent that we're not quite sure where we are as far as the church is concerned, but I'm here to tell you, as far as the people walking in the street are concerned and shopping, as I have talked at lunch, shopping in Morrison's and Tesco's and little villages around the country, Jesus is not an awareness of a life with them. We are living in such a secular society at the moment, and my only solace is that God does know, and we are in his hands. And when I pray, or when I sit in silence to be with God, because that's how I would like to live, if I live with God, if I live with him, if I try to live with him, it doesn't matter where I am or who I'm with. I can live with God in a church, outside a church, in anywhere I go. But we are in a society that has blocked God out, but God knows, and he does know. And that's my solace when I'm in a theatre, and it's my solace when I come out of the theatre. It's my solace when I do dreadful things myself, because he really does know, and one is convicted of that as well. But what's it like, my Christian life out there? I loved doing the Bible. I love reading the whole Bible, the recording of the Bible, because as I was recording of the Bible, I was reminded of the words, "Hear the word of the Lord." And when I recorded the Bible, I wear headphones like this. So as I'm talking now through that mic, actually I'm hearing my voice in a completely different way, as though somebody is talking to me. And it was like that when I was reading the Bible. So I was actually hearing what I read. So I got a double whammy when I was doing it, and I was able to stop, because the preparation for each chapter, for each book, each chapter, each sections of chapter, the work that went in, so many hours of theological study, trying to keep it in truth with the author and their intentions. Suddenly, when I'm recording it, I will hear myself saying a line or even a little verse that will make me think, "Oh gosh, no, I've suddenly realised." And that's the big advantage of being able to then stop and say, "I'd like to read that again." But it was an amazing experience for me to hear God's word, albeit in a translation that many here will not like. But God is still speaking through, and that was an amazing experience. So thank you for a wonderful introduction, but thank you more for the fact that I'm in your passenger seat.
I think you're very much in the lead, but in the driver's seat. Thank you for that. I must say that I resonate with what you're saying, because from Monday to Friday, I feel like I'm struggling to, I don't want to move this into a very personal conversation, but I have to say this because I feel like from Monday to Friday I'm struggling to be an Orthodox priest. It's hard. We work in an institute, we're blessed to work in this institute where we have a connection with God, with theology, with a different way of life, but still, I look forward to Sunday as going forward to a spring well of truth and life, where I recharge myself and can face the week that follows. And I resonate with what you say. I mean, it's hard to see sometimes God around us in the way society functions. And I often ask myself, what part am I in this? And I want to sort of, with this thought, come back to the question of, do you see, where is the opportunity, where is the niche, where Christianity or Christians, regardless of their tradition, can make a difference? Because it's not just a question of resistance or coping, but I think, is there a chance to, can we look into the sort of, we're talking this morning as well about the intrinsic pluralism of Christianity. And we live in a very pluralistic society.
Well, we do live in a pluralistic society, but Christianity, and I'm not a theologian, so I mean, I did study theology at one point, but I theologized my brain out of my spiritual life. I became so bound up in theology and belief and interpretation and translation, and that I forgot my right relationship with God, which has got nothing to do, actually, for me, with theology. It's got to do with being with my father or mother or whoever. And to live in right relationship with God is the meaning of the word religion for me. To live in right relationship. Because if it's not a relationship that I have, as Jesus had with the Father, Father, it's family. And Jesus said, I call you brothers. We're family. So it's a relationship. And that relationship needs to be shared. Jesus said, make disciples of all nations. He didn't say convert them. A disciple is a student, sits at the feet of a teacher to learn and to study and to be part and allow that teaching to change their life. We're not here to convert. I don't believe that. I believe we're here to nurture, to inform, to feed, and therefore grow. Let them grow with God's love. The seed has been planted. Make disciples. I think that we need to share. I think the need to share now is more important than in any other time in our lives. We're out in the world where terrorism does not just end or begin with Islamists and fundamentalists from Islam. We have Christian extremists and fundamentalists that throw bombs into abortion clinic, believing they're doing it in God's name. We as Christians have behaved appallingly in history in the name of God. In fact, I did a whole program just recently on Amazon Audible podcasts on the three Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Islam and Christianity, and can there be peace? I did 10 half hours and took me to America, took me to Israel, took me to Northern Ireland, and I did those 10 podcasts were really almost the most important thing I've ever done as a Christian, because I called it my tumble dryer experience. And why did I call it my tumble dryer experience? Because I would go and meet former terrorists. I met murderers. I met people who tried to blow up the Dome of the Rock. I met people who had been responsible for killing children. And I went in there and I watched these hate preachers from Christians to fundamentalist Zionists to Islamists. And in one particular preacher, I won't mention the religion or tradition, but I watched them on the internet before I was going to interview them. And I couldn't help but go there with a certain chip on my shoulder. And I tried not to, but I couldn't. I went in there with my own agenda. But I have to tell you why I call it my tumble dryer experience is because after about half an hour, I find myself going, really? Really? Because their belief and their commitment and their passion and conviction was so strong, and it was that knocked the chip on my shoulder off. It wasn't what they said or what they've done. It was how and what they were within with belief and conviction. And I would come away sometimes thinking, I wish I had that for Jesus. I wish I had that conviction and passion for the Trinity. I wish I really had that for my experience with the Eucharist. Because then, well, maybe I wouldn't mind sharing that in a different way. But not in a way, of course, that would hopefully, not in a way that would make me an extremist or a fundamentalist. There's huge danger with religion and texts. And as soon, I've read the Quran 5 times, I've read the Bible many more times, I've read the Old Testament on its own because I put myself in the mind of Jesus and only read the Old Testament for months and months and months and months and months, because that's what he quoted from. Jesus was not a Christian. Now, I know I'm saying that to you, and you're saying, why is he saying that? Jesus isn't a Christian. I'll tell you why I'm saying that, because my cousin said, well, Mary was a Christian. I said, really? He said, yeah. Well, she gave birth to Christ. You see, this is where I'm talking about lack of teaching as well. But sharing. I believe we, the Abrahamic family, have the greatest potential within us, having done those 10 half-hour podcasts and talked to so many people for so many hours and for so many weeks, that there is a level of that root that we are all joined. Yes, we branch off, as we did. Don't forget, we branched off from Judaism. We were only known as Christians in Antioch, that little group of Christians in Antioch. They were the only ones who were known as Christians at that time. And they were a Jewish sect. We must never forget our roots. We came from Abraham with the Jews, together with Jesus, who was a Jew through and through. I come not to change a jot or a tittle, nothing. But it's how you use it for the benefit and love for others. That's what he taught as the Son of God and as divine. There is a chance where we can eat and share food with the Jewish tradition, with the Muslim tradition, and the Christian tradition, as all brothers from the Father, from our root. We can eat together. If you eat together, you talk together, you share food together, you have relationship together. Gone is Sunday lunch in the families. What a shame. It's no surprise that families are splitting up. We need to be together, to share food, to have relationship. And if we have that relationship with the Jewish faith, that glorious faith that was Jesus' faith, read the Old Testament, dive into it, deal with it. He knew about the Canaanites and the so-called genocide. He knew. He dealt with it. He was God. So don't fight it. It's there. Deal with it. Learn the Psalms. Read the Psalms. Be a blotting paper for the Old Testament, because that's the foundation rock of the New. Pluralism. Gosh, it was there from day one. You have James, you have Peter, you have Paul. Faith, works, faith. You have differences, but we have to embrace those differences in an inclusive way. I'm not sure that Jesus would have approved of necessarily all his disciples, or whether they were. He said, drink this, all of you. He was inclusive. Who he mixed with. They were not the elite. They were not the theological colleges. He didn't teach theology. He taught relationship. He taught how to love. And that's why the two great commandments, the unifying one word, love God, love neighbor. And here we come with love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And that's where that conviction and that inner strength comes from. We talked about Father Callistos talking about what is a human. I think it's wonderful, what is a person? By the way, person, as you know, per son, through sound. The Greek mask through which actors first spoke was called the persona, because they had a little hole for the mouth, through sound. It may interest you to know that the human voice is completely individual to you. You have your own voice print, to such an extent that MI5 and CIA in the war, they were thinking of doing voice prints, because whatever accent you put on, or even if I speak up here, my print will be the same. And they were thinking of doing that and fingerprinting at the same time, which is fascinating. But what is a person? What is a human? Well, let's go back to what Jesus said, how you love God. With all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And we often say to ourselves, what is a person made up of? Mind, body, and spirit, or soul, spirit. Well, let's talk about gymnastics now. We exercise our mind with our education, with our theology, wonderful. We exercise our body with gymnastics, with now weightlifting and everything. We're pretty good on that level. That's our two legs. But our third leg is our spirit and soul life. That's our creative life. We're the only animal on this planet that can take a piece of paper and write or draw lines, put in dots, that somebody else will get a bit of tree and do something with it, and play sounds corresponding to those dots in front of his own, who will show appreciation with their antennae. Antennae meaning these which feel. We're the only animal in the planet that entertains our own in that way, outside of courtship. We're the only animal that reads. We're the only animal that reads different languages. We're the only animals that perform drama outside of courtship. Our soul life is our creative life. In the beginning, God created. He spoke the word and saw that it was good. Created. We are creative, and we are in the image of God. So if we are in the image of God and have that whole soul life, why is it not exercised? Because at the moment we're sitting on 2.5 stools, legs on our stools, and we can't sit straight. We topple over all the time. Why? Because we're not learning to be who we are, which are sons and daughters of God, and we are in his image. We live on 2 legs, and those legs of mind and body can lead to ego and a sense of false self. And Jesus said we have to let that self die. And that's what he was talking about in the seed that has to die in order for the root to grow. He's talking about ego. He's talking about ourselves. We have to strip ourselves, be naked, and suffer if necessary, and die to ourself. Die to self. Great church teaching in order to grow. Oh, there's so much. But that's why it's tough out there. And that's why we need to share. And that's why I very nearly became Orthodox. And Father Alexander Teft, I'm so pleased to see here today, was so wonderful to me and welcomed me at St Botolph's in London. And the reason I nearly became Orthodox was because the attitude of Orthodoxy and their conviction is absolutely wonderful. And the reason I did not become Orthodox in the end, and I know, and I'm not saying this to offend, and I've read all the books, and I've read your wonderful works on this, and I've read your words, and I agree with them totally, and then I find I can't do it, is I want open communion. I want I want to be welcomed. I want to be welcomed by my brothers and sisters in Christ to share that meal. And I know theologically, and I understand totally the reasons. I totally understand. But I want to sit with you, and I want to share the blood and body of our Lord with you as your brother, as a brother in Christ. I have a relationship with a person. It's not my relationship with the church. Can I live my life without the church? No. It is absolutely essential to my Christian belief, my Christian growth, and my Christian education. More teaching, please. But I have to live in a family. I don't like saying I'm an Anglican. I don't like, if I was, I wouldn't like saying I'm a Roman Catholic. And if I was, I wouldn't like to box myself in and say I am just Orthodox. I'm a Christian. And my relationship and my belief and the person I follow and want to be with is Christ, is Jesus. Actually, Jesus bar Yosef. Joshua bar Yosef. A lot of people think Christ was his surname. It's bar Yosef. That's who I want to be with. That's who I want to hold hands with, you and you and you, irrespective of your title, irrespective of your job, irrespective of everybody. I'd like to throw my arms around you and share that moment in the Eucharist, and then take that Eucharistic experience in the street. Not by preaching and by bashing over the head, but by knowing that I'm full of God's love, that he will then be able to come through me and let me be his instrument. He's cleared me out of self. He's got rid of my drudge. He is in me, with me. We are in a relationship, and therefore I take him with me wherever I go, and I try and do that and fail miserably every single day. But therefore I will try and not have any belief or idea that will block another Christian. I don't want that. Don't want it at all. I mean, when I was doing the last confession, the wonderful actor who was playing the Pope used to talk to me about Roman Catholicism, and we had our arguments and fights about Anglicanism and Roman Catholicism and Protestantism and there's and whoa. And in the end, we just hugged each other and say, thank God we're Christian. Because actually, you can't live with the differences, but you can share Christ.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to respond to that, if at all. Maybe I will dare to say this, that I think I have seen some of what you're saying, and that is a wonderful eschatological almost vision, I think, of where we will eventually be, I think. And I suppose lots of people resonate with your words. But I think I've seen a glimpse of that here. I don't want to bring it all in a very cheap way to the Institute, but I've seen this here in Cambridge, in the Cambridge Theological Federation, and in the encounter that we have here in the dialogue. There is a sense of communion and community, also a sense of frustration, also a sense of difference, also a sense of as I mentioned earlier, of a journey among all of the people and all of the houses and all of the Christians, all of the colleagues that are part of this federation in Cambridge and of the Institute. One of the first things that I mean, the best years of my life are because of the Institute. And I'm not saying as a principal. I've only been principal for less than a year. It's the years that I was a student here, and all the years subsequently. They tend to coincide with as many years I've been married to my wife. So maybe that's not necessarily a coincidence. But the reason why I've said that the best years have been this is because I grew up as a theologian in Romania, as a young student of theology in Romania. And I had to come here to the Institute to understand some of those things.
Yes.
I understood that slowly and actually painfully sometimes that the choice that sometimes we have to make is who wins? Is it people or is it rules? Do we put people before rules? Do we put boundaries or to separate us or to help us come closer to one another? And I think one of the things that I learned here, both as a student and I think I'm learning every day in the communion that we have with all the other staff, students, members, supporters, is I think that we are wrestling with this and we're trying to make this happen. And it's an imperfect communion that we have. It's an imperfect fellowship in some ways, but it's perfect the way it is somehow.
But I'd just like to throw just one thing at you, because I've been so excited by being here today in this wonderful institute and the way that you work here and the fact that you do have this fantastic outreach and working, and I'm very excited about that. I think we should all live our lives now as Paul really believed that it was all going to end tomorrow.
Yes.
Because that would, I mean, Paul really did believe the end of the world, that, you know, Jesus was coming any moment. And he lived his life according to that. And that's why he walked for thousands of miles quicker than anybody could ever. Yes, he had the odd donkey, but he walked because he needed to. He had this fervour because he believed that Jesus was coming now, tomorrow, at any moment. And his letters reflect that urgency. And Jesus died 2,000 years ago. Well, we've got a lot to do in a very short time. I wish we were really convinced that it really could be tomorrow and show him what we are capable of, Christians.
Yes.
Because what you're explaining is so great that there's an urgent need now in the world today with what I've been talking about what's happening in our world and what's happening in this country in particular, or Western Europe that you mentioned. Just add that given circumstance and then you have a play. You have a drama, and it's called the drama of life, and you've got to get it right because you haven't got much time because you're coming back tomorrow, or maybe
this evening. Yes, there's a door open there.
Maybe.
Yes. I'm mindful of the time, and we did promise that we would give a chance to the audience to intervene.
Oh yes, now you can attack me.
So I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. Okay, one here for John, first hand up, then Irina, and then, yes, there in the middle. Oh, you could just start. I think we can.
I thought a microphone was coming.
It is, yes.
Thank you. You've spoken very eloquently in opposition to liberalism. Now, one would have to know a lot more about the history of liberalism and exactly what it means. But one aspect of this, of course, is respect for other people and of their opinions. What I would like to ask is, could you be a bit more specific and say what liberal attitudes or beliefs we should be actually opposed to?
I'm not going to be that specific because I don't want to be that controversial at this in this assembly. But join me for a drink. I'll have a chat with you. I think we've got to be following the teachings of the gospel. The gospel is our litmus test. We've lost free speech in our over-liberalised society. Strange, but we've lost it. Tim Farron would agree with you on that. We've lost it completely. In terms of same-sex marriages, in terms of that, I do have my own private opinion. It's not that I'm dwelling on. I want to get back to the Beatitudes. I want to get back to the Sermon on the Mount. I want people to preach the Sermon on the Mount over and over and over and over and over again, because we need to hear it. That is our litmus test of how to be, the impossibility of being able to be. But we must. The gospel is our boundary, is our limitation. You've also got to look at our society. Our society has changed, and you cannot live in aspic. You cannot have a world that just behaves in every way as they did 2,000 years ago, or in some countries today. You cannot cut off a person's hand now because they steal. You cannot cut a person's tongue out because they lie. We have moved on. Society has moved on. And religion has to move on. And we do reform. We were talking about reforming. As long as that reforming is within the gospel truths. And they are there. And of course they're to be interpreted. And that's where we need leadership. We need moral leadership. We need authority. We do need authority. And we need teaching. These are essential for us to not just be pointing fingers at judging and saying that's wrong, that's too wrong, that's too wrong. We need to be sure of what our teaching is according to the gospel, the good news and the teaching of Christ. You know, when I read the New Testament out loud, I suppose I could do it all in a day if I really got going. Jesus preached for 3 years. We only know that much of what he said. It's a fraction of what he said. I'd love to have been with him for 3 years and heard him speaking for 3 years, rather than the snippets that we've got. But we do have a great deal of teaching, and we know his attitude, and we know his rage, and we know his attitude to his church. And we know we can form a character, there's a character there. I won't go into that at the moment, but there is a character there. But in terms of liberalism, in terms of over-liberalism, yes, we can change, we can become more liberal in terms of punishment, in terms of this, that and the other, but let's Jesus was not there to punish. The woman caught in adultery, which was a sentence of death, he said no. Now, very cleverly, he turned it round and said, anybody here innocent of what she's done, fine. And they all went home and that's what we remember. But actually what we should dwell on was he said no to the death penalty of his Judaistic tradition. That's what he challenged. He said, no, you're wrong. That may be what it says, but I say. All those wonderful you say this, but I say. That was quite liberal. That's very liberal to do that with a group of those Middle Eastern men with rocks and a girl caught in adultery. And he's, no. He could be really called very liberal.
I am sad you feel so inhibited about being able to say what you feel.
Thank you. I think we'll take is there a question here? No. Irina, and I'm not sure. We'll see how the question goes, but I'm mindful of the time as well.
First of all, I want to thank you for an absolutely inspirational confession of faith. You also evoked, in a very few words, but the terrifying picture of where mostly our Western society, but probably not only, has come, where man replaces God, and where an awful lot of people have actually, they don't even know what it means when you say God, let alone any reference to anyone, any person in either the Old Testament or the New Testament. There are more and more of those. And at the same time, as I say, you have given us a wonderful, glowing confession of your faith, and which should be ours as well. Where do we meet?
In our relationship with Christ.
Will they hear us?
Will Christ hear us?
No, Christ will hear us, but...
Where do we meet?
Yes.
In that position of unity.
Where do the people who don't even know what the word God means?
Then we look to our society, we look to our churches, we look to our leadership, and we challenge that leadership to educate and to learn. We are in a society that bans almost religious education.
Exactly.
And if we take education out of the religious experience, it will never grow because the seeds can't be planted. And therefore I would like to, and I can't because of what I am, I'd like to have meetings with church leaders to see how we can have a church education outside of the church. You know, we preach to the converted, we teach to the Christian families and make disciples of all nations, not convert all nations. We need students. And the only way you can have students is to have teachers.
Yes.
And that's what we have to provide. Good teaching. It's essential for you, all of you here. You would not be where you are if it wasn't for your teaching and what you were taught. And then you grow and you have your own ideas and grow. But you know your limits. You know. So where, how, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. It's certainly not going to happen in anybody's lifetime here, however young you are. It's going to take tens and tens and tens of years. But who knows what the church will be in 100 years' time? And we don't know. But as I say, God knows. And that's my solace. That's my solace. But I pray with you. I would pray every minute for teachers. Teachers, teachers, teachers. And that's where Jesus placed himself. People called him rabbi. People called him rabbi. And he never denied that. He never said, he did say, why do you call me good? But he never said, don't call me teacher. He was the greatest teacher. And we have his teaching. And that he has taught us. We are his disciples. We need to teach. But how? I don't know.
Thank you. I'm sorry, the last question. When there'll be time afterwards. If you there'll be drinks at the end, so sort of closing drinks. So I'm sure there'll be another chance to discuss with Mr. Suchet. Can I just say thank you very much for the generosity of your spirit, for your profound Christian faith, and for sharing all of that with us today. If anything, it has just opened the appetite for more. And I hope that this won't be sort of the last time we have a chance to share this space with you. And again, just say thank you.
Thank you.
For being with us.